Konnichiwa, Casey desu. Hajimemashite. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Hello, I'm Casey. Nice to meet you. Please be kind to me. This is what I just said to you, but you wouldn't know that unless you speak Japanese. And up until a few weeks ago, I didn't know what that meant either. But right now, I'm living amongst the chaos that is Tokyo, relishing in many new cultural experiences as both a student and a teacher of language. I think that one of the greatest challenges for a teacher is to be able to speak the same language as each and every student in the classroom. Now, I'm not talking about literally speaking in a different language like I did just moments ago. I mean finding a way to effectively engage and communicate ideas to diverse learners who are likely to tune in and interpret information in different ways. Each person wants to know how the message affects them personally. Like a sieve, they'll churn out the information just as quickly as it went in if they don't think they can relate or that the information is going to affect them in any significant way. Teachers need to skillfully present information in a multitude of ways to ensure that the learner feels as though the information is being directed to them. By being made aware of the benefits of tuning into the communication, the learner will be far more persistent in trying to understand new challenging concepts. Today, I learned some new words in Japanese. They are makoto ni lekai, which means to truly understand. I think that one of the greatest challenges for teachers is to make sure that each individual student makoto ni lekai for every concept in each lesson. With technology advancing at such a rapid pace, more so now than ever before, I think it's our duty as educators to stay a few steps ahead of those we claim to be teaching. Sadly, as a pre-service teacher, I observe many long-serving senior teachers shying away from using anything requiring a power source to enhance their lessons. Surprisingly, many teachers don't seem to embrace change. The Education Department rolls out the latest groundbreaking programs, advocates for alternative learning spaces, and provides funding for the schools to purchase more gadgets than they know what to do with, literally. Unless the school has a really enthusiastic teacher championing the latest edition and making it their personal mission to ensure everyone at least attempts to give it a go, more often than not, it'll sit dormant like the novelty daily flip calendar taking up precious space on teachers' desks across the nation. I think teachers sometimes feel so out of their depth with new technology or any radical new program that they neglect to retrain themselves and attempt to justify their stance by saying, "I've been doing it this way for years." No wonder there's such a juxtaposition when a zealous university student is teamed up with a rigid senior mentor teacher. When it comes to planning lessons, the student teacher wants to integrate their new library of online links into each and every lesson, while the person who's meant to be mentoring feels overwhelmed with such foreign content and teaching strategies. Without discounting the sheer wealth of knowledge and experience possessed by our senior teachers, we need to figure out a way we can create more collaborative partnerships where both emerging and long-standing teachers inspire one another. If there are conflicting views regarding how a classroom should operate, our emerging teachers may struggle to gain the vital support and necessary opportunities to develop their skills during their practical placements. With students tending to favour the use of digital technologies to assist their learning, it's important that teachers aren't sticking with traditional methods for the sake of their own comfort or personal preference. Until it is acknowledged by Australia's senior teachers and education authorities that unless one is willing to wholesomely adopt new programs and technologies as they emerge and be given the time to develop confidence in using them, our nation is going to continue to fiercely debate whether our teachers and the programs they are delivering are keeping up with the times and ultimately accelerating the academic progression of our nation. Aside from teachers becoming more tech-savvy, I believe that as a nation we need to reevaluate what it means to be an effective teacher in the 21st century. Once upon a time, before Google existed, a teacher's merit was largely based on his or her content knowledge. Anyone born before the 90s is likely to agree that their experience as a student was to remain quiet and listen. Teachers were expected to know all the answers, and even if they didn't, they'd lead us to believe that they did, because at that time, that's what society deemed as common practice. However, as times change, we need to let go of wanting to see things happen the way they used to. We're doing our kids a disservice if we allow nostalgia to dictate
today's practices, for there was no such thing as iPads, apps, or even laptops for the majority of the adult population. Now that Google has alleviated the extent of general knowledge a teacher is expected to possess, and teachers can rely on quality resources to support just about anything they're teaching, the imprinted visual memory of a teacher standing at the front of the classroom, urging the masses to copy down what's in front of them, is truly outdated. The whole learning environment and the relationship between teacher and student has dramatically shifted over the past 20 or so years. The teacher is now more like a facilitator for learning, coaching students on how to find the answers for themselves. I believe that those who are acknowledged by the school community as standout teachers are those who can adapt their interactions to suit the range of personalities within their classroom. They are the teachers who dedicate the time to learning how to best relate to each student, know their interests, their social behaviour, and what motivates them. Building strong relationships with each student is the key to becoming an influential facilitator, which is why I believe universities and trainers need to place a greater emphasis on helping teachers develop their interpersonal skills. Company CEOs have frequent training on how to adjust their communication style to suit their clients. So why do we expect teachers to be able to do this innately or not place importance on this skill at all? Teachers need to explicitly learn how to adjust their communication style to be understood and to get the most out of all their students. If done so effectively, students are likely to take a more active role in their learning. When starting out as a graduate, you're still developing your perception of what it means to be an effective teacher. You're conscious of how others will perceive you, and you're sensitive towards exposing your weaknesses. I know that when I first started, I felt like I had to always exhibit a high level of confidence towards whatever I was doing, even if on the inside I was freaking out. For example, I know I'm a weak speller, and even the thought of misspelling frequently used words in front of an audience would make me blush with embarrassment. I always dreaded modelling writing on the board, as I'd call on students to dictate their ideas while I scribe. Rather than feel excited by a student's exotic word choice, I'd cringe while attempting to write the word, then spend the remainder of the lesson fixated on whether it looked right and praying no adult entered the room in fear of their superior spelling knowledge and potentially associated judgment on my overall teaching ability. It sounds crazy, but I'm sure many of you can relate. It was only after a few years of teaching that I became genuinely comfortable admitting to my students when I didn't know how to spell something and allow them to suggest strategies I could use. It took even longer to recognise how vital it is for students to witness the vulnerable side of a teacher and to be explicitly shown that it's okay to make mistakes, rather than simply being told and expected to do so. Despite factors such as age, experience, or background, we all need to take risks and make mistakes in order to learn something new. It makes no sense to me now that teachers should try to cover up or avoid demonstrating that crucial step of the learning process. This simple piece of advice resonated for one of my fourth-year pre-service teachers I mentored last year. The following is a reflection she wrote after spending 3 weeks in my classroom.
A moment of my own learning from Casey that I'll never forget occurred during a moment of mild stress. While I was planning a lesson on the relationship between fractions and decimals and trying to make it meaningful and understandable for both the grade 3s and myself, Casey told me to remember that the kids need to enjoy coming to...
Even saddens me at times relates to how we conduct formal assessment of students' learning. I want to highlight this issue not only from the perspective of an educator, but also based on my own experiences as a student. Teachers are required to heavily rely on written assessment to delegate students' results and give feedback. While I recognise that this is a necessary part of the learning process, the assessments teachers are expected to use place great emphasis on one's ability to perform under a very prescribed set of circumstances. In my opinion, written assessments in some ways do not reflect the real world, particularly in the 21st century. We now value different types of intelligences, such as social and emotional intelligence. We highly value creativity and entrepreneurship. We can forgive someone for not having the immediate answer as long as they know how to find it. We want to surround ourselves with people who display enthusiasm and who can effectively communicate under diverse circumstances. Written assessments don't measure these valuable skills, nor give students the opportunity to celebrate these qualities within themselves. My own memories of receiving undesirable assessment results in class is etched into the back of my mind. My answers were always slightly askew, which resulted in low marks, which was ultimately what counted. Although it was disheartening, I was confident enough in my own abilities to recognise that the knowledge I did possess was valuable, even if my scores didn't suggest so. What worries me as a teacher is that some students may not have developed such self-awareness. As a result of constantly receiving low marks, they can become disengaged and unmotivated because they think their efforts are worthless. I recognise that teachers are free to assess all these other aspects I've spoken about. However, when it comes to official record keeping, we are bound by the demands of our school and education department. There is still far too great of an importance placed on standardised testing across the nation, and it's not reflective of how we assess one's abilities outside of educational institutions.